Daniel and his friends obey God. God had warned his people that unless they turned back to him, he would allow the Babylonians to defeat them and take them away as slaves. Among those living in Jerusalem was a young man called Daniel. They ignored God's warnings, and during the king Jehoiakim's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Babylonians laid siege to the city of Jerusalem with Daniel trapped inside the city. The Lord allowed the Babylonians to take the city. The victorious army took sacred objects from the temple of God to take back to Babylon. The Babylonians then took away all the top leaders and the most able people, leaving only the poor behind. Among those taken to Babylon was Daniel. Daniel and the Israelite prisoners were marched back to Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to select from the prisoners the very best of the young men from royal and noble families. They had to be strong, healthy, good-looking and clever. Among those Ashpenaz chose were Daniel and 3 of his friends: Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The 4 were given Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belshazzar. Ananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach. Azariah was called Abednego. These 4 young Jewish men were to be trained for 3 years in the language and literature of Babylon. They would also be given food and wine from the king's own kitchen. Daniel knew the meat being offered was not prepared as God had set out in the laws of Moses, and he did not want to become drunk with wine. Daniel asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. The chief of staff refused. "The king has ordered that you eat this food and wine," he said. "If you become pale and thin, the king will have me beheaded." Daniel did not give in. He spoke with the attendant, "Test us for 10 days on a diet of vegetables and water, then compare us to the others eating the king's food." So for 10 days Daniel and his 3 friends were fed vegetables and water while the others ate the king's food and drank wine. At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the rest, so they were allowed to continue with their diet. God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. At the end of their training they were presented to King Nebuchadnezzar. No one impressed the king as much as Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service. The king found them 10 times more capable than any of his wise men. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Share and leave a comment. Subscribe.